The American Civil War, the most vicious and quite frankly vile wars that has ever been perpetrated on US soil. With over 620,000 fatal casualties, it's no wonder that it's remembered as a valuable lesson in history that as a country, we need to stick together through thick and thin and work towards a better union. Probably. Make that for what you will. But what if I told you that there was another civil war that occurred approximately 121 years later, and it wasn't just Texas declaring for the 20th time they were their own republic? No, this is completely different. A completely new republic that established on US territory and even declared a full-scale war against them, but surrendered in 1 minute. Would you be more shocked if I mentioned it involved Cuban bread? Well, let me stop teasing you. This is the story of the Conch Republic's fight for independence. We all love Florida, hopefully. It's a beautiful vacation spot with weather and politics so bipolar that you can categorize it as a moody teenager. But one aspect that is universally loved about this strange state is the Keys, a jaw-droppingly amazing set of islands connected by a giant road. It's the definition of a tourist trap, and if you've ever been there, you probably never want to leave. It's paradise, and for the longest time, it was just that, a bona fide tourist destination. It isn't a shock to say that this tourism is what fuels their economy, because let's face it, the Keys doesn't really have many exports. Most of their money, if not all, is made through fishing, boating, hotels, you name it, things that a tourist would like to see. And since its inception, that's how it operated, undisturbed and at relative peace and independence from the rest of the United States, relatively. That was until the year 1982, when things took a turn for the better, maybe? You see, if you know anything, and I mean anything about Florida, and especially Miami, during the 80s, it was essentially the drug capital of the country. You name it, coke, meth, pills, weed, lots of weed. It was all in abundance in every corner. And unsurprisingly, organized crime made a home in Florida because of the drugs. In order to combat these issues, they decided to set up a Border Patrol roadblock, an inspection point on one of the only 2 roads that connected the Keys to the mainland. This served 2 purposes: to block drugs or drug money coming from the mainland and leaving from the Keys, and to stop illegal immigrants coming from the Caribbean and landing on beaches. This, on paper, sounds like a great idea until you realize that thousands of people a day, even at this time, were passing through the Keys for either work, as many folks took that route to get to their jobs, or for just plain tourism, the island's main source of income. Having a border patrol stop you and search your vehicle, check IDs, and other miscellaneous things made it a headache for anyone just wanting to get past. This also dangerously congested the other highway, making it a genuine danger to cross it. This heavily affected the Keys tourism industry, and many city council officials at the time were rightfully angry at the US government essentially cutting off one of their main sources of income. In the first couple of months of this border inspection team being set up, less people were taking cars to the Keys and instead flying there, spurring a statewide monopoly of Eastern Airlines, as it was at the time the only airline to travel to the Keys. Overall, it was just a shit show, and the US government just didn't care. Even when the council suggested an injunction on the highway to maybe speed up the process of border checking, the US government just ignored them. Enter Dennis Wardlow, the mayor at the time, who saw this border roadblock as a major injustice to the city, not helped by repeatedly being ignored by the US government when suggesting their own ideas for a mutually beneficial solution. That's why, in collaboration with the city council, Key West on April 23, 1982, declared independence from the Union.
We walked out of the courthouse steps and decided at that point we unfolded our flag and declared that we were seceding, and we would raise our flag the following day in front of the Chamber of Commerce and would be officially known as the Conch Republic.
On April 23, 1982, a major incident took place here in Key West, Florida, which threatened to drag the United States into an unthinkable conflict. The Second American Civil War broke out.
The thought was that if they're going to be putting border checkpoints just outside of the Keys, like we're our own foreign nation, why the hell are we even still part of the Union in the first place? This tension between the Keys and the US had been brewing for many years. Most of those living on the island didn't even refer to themselves as American citizens, but as Conchs, funnily enough. The Keys ultimately is a very independent part of the United States, with federal aid only ever being dished out during natural disasters. But even then, most of the time, community would solve those issues much faster than the government ever did. As part of the protest, Mayor Waldau broke in half a loaf of stale Cuban bread over the head of a man dressed in a naval uniform as a declaration of war, only to surrender after 1 minute and apply for $1 billion in foreign aid. The roadblocks were removed quickly then on afterwards, but the US, in character, continued to ignore their other issues for the next 13 years, spurring on even more protests. But thankfully enough, this one actually worked. Wardlow went on to say in an interview concerning their newly found independence that, "We're happy to secede today with some humor, but there is some anger too." The subsequent publicity gained from the protest spurred a tourism bonanza, as many would flock to this new nation to take in the sights and just have a good time. It's still the Keys after all. But they still pay taxes. But this underlying sentiment that the Keys were underappreciated and essentially irrelevant to the federal government continued on. The next set of protests occurred on September 20th, 1995. You see, while the war lasted a minute, the Republic, funnily enough, never really dissolved, and Waldau was still the acting mayor, and subsequently, the prime minister of the set of islands. Unbeknownst to the council, a battalion of the United States Army Reserve was set to conduct a training exercise in which they would be simulating an invasion on a foreign island. This would be fine and dandy, and hey, a great way to further spread the message of the Conch Republic's status as an independent nation. However, what put a damper on that was the fact that the United States never told anybody that this was happening, so this simulated invasion was only known to the battalion. No one from the council knew this was going to happen until the army marched on their beach and streets. Seizing the opportunity for another protest, Mayor Waldau sent a call to arms to immediately mobilize the Republic for war, sending the schooner Western Union, the last surviving authentic working tall ship that was built in Florida, to attack the Coast Guard and the battalion. Instead of bullets, they threw water balloons, conch fritters, and again, stale Cuban bread. Just 2 days later after this demonstration, instead of the Department of Defense ignoring the Conch Republic, they immediately issued an apology, saying, "In no way we meant to challenge or impugn the sovereignty of the Conch Republic." And they even went on to hold a surrender ceremony on the same day, the 22nd. According to rumors from people who attended this ceremony that occurred, it was just a massive beach party of army officials and members of the council, and it was conducted after the mock ceremony. God, that's so fucking stupid. While there were more protests that occurred in the 90s due to the government shutdown, the next larger demonstration occurred on January 13th, 2006. Let's go back in time for a second. There are technically two 7-mile bridges. The old one built in 1935, and the newer one that is still used today built in 1982. With the abandoned bridge being far too expensive to demolish, it still remains up to this day, mirroring the more modern bridge. Although the old bridge was still frequently used by small cars, bikes, and other lighter weight vehicles, largely by the 2000s, this bridge was unusable, with a part of it having to be removed due to the danger that it presented, as the bridge was beginning to sag. Going back to 2006, Peter Anderson, an outspoken supporter of the Conch Republic who was involved with another case concerning the Keys, purported to annex the abandoned span of the 7-mile bridge. This was in response to another controversy that occurred just a couple of days prior. You see, Cuba is super close to the Keys, so much so that Cuban immigrants who manage to escape their country usually either head straight for Miami Beach or the Keys, namely the 7-mile bridge. At this time, Cuban refugees had a sort of special status in the United States, with the controversial policy, wet feet, dry feet. Essentially, unlike other immigrants, if a Cuban refugee manages to touch dry land, they are offered parole and given the opportunity to become a US citizen. However, if they are caught on water, even if they're mere feet away from the nearest piece of dry land, they will be immediately returned to Cuba. It seems cruel, but this was an agreement between the US government and Cuba, as at this time, there was still trade talk between them. This policy, however, was tested on January 4th, as 15 Cuban refugees were caught by the Coast Guard and were set to be returned to Cuba, even though they reached the 7-mile bridge and managed to actually stand on it. That was because the US decided that the abandoned bridge was a wet feet location. The thought was that since the section of the road that connected to the mainland was removed, then it was not part of US territory. Anderson, seeing the US essentially claim that the bridge was free game for any country to seize because because it's not connected to the mainland, with the help of the Conch Republic, they claimed it for themselves. Anderson and the rest of the council proposed a plan to turn the bridge into an affordable housing project. It sounds far-fetched, but tiny homes were just getting a start in the country, and to combat homelessness, the Conch Republic thought it would be very profitable and charitable to start planting these tiny homes along the highway. So this was an opportunity for Florida to potentially solve their homelessness issue and make a sizable amount of money. These plans, unfortunately, never came to fruition as the United States revoked its position as a wet zone and the 7 Mile Bridge once again belonged to the United States government, and it became a dry zone. Sadly, this happened after the refugees were returned to Cuba, and later on that entire policy would be removed when the Cuban embargo was enacted. Since then, the Conch Republic hasn't been up to much, but the idea and the identity still lives on in the hearts of the key citizens and tourists who are interested in this bizarre history, as the Republic still stands strong with their own army, navy, and air force, primarily made up of retirees, battle reenactors, and ex-military. Their influence also extends into the wider pop culture, as many novels, merch, and even Florida culture has been shaped by the Conch Republic. Funnily enough, they even have their own official national anthem, written in 1994. Hopefully this video isn't copyrighted, but if you hear the song playing, then it wasn't. What's even better is that every year on April 23rd, 1982, the city would hold their own version of Independence Day, with fireworks, food, boat shows, and many more activities. They even hold battle recreations, like the one that was fought on the Western Union in 1995. It truly is a great sight to see if you ever get to witness it. Overall, while yes, this Civil War was more sarcastic than literal, it just goes to show how a tiny set of islands stood up to the rest of the country and protested until they got the change that they wanted. You have to commend them on that at least. And come on, it's hilarious. Hi, hello, welcome again. Thank you for making it to the end of this video, and if you liked it, please subscribe, like, whatever, share it if you want. Ooh, there goes it. So anyway, yep, this is gonna be the end card from now on if you like my mug, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I just keep saying that, but see ya, I guess, and yeah.
You're